Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Johnny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast. It's Friday, it's 5pm, there should be a beer in your glass, unless you're driving. That's so illegal, it's not even true. But welcome to the weekend, you made it, and Brad and I are here, about to engage in some utterly ridiculous nonsense, much like there was in the comments of this week's video, which I've thoroughly enjoyed looking through. I haven't quite had time to reply to everything, but there have been some absolute crackers that we're going to be digging into a little bit later in the show. How are you, Brad? I've just talked for 30 seconds. People might even assume you're not there and I'm doing another monologue.
Aha, I'm all right. I'm here. You just made me think about, is it illegal to drink alcohol-free beers while driving if they're alcohol-free? Because it's a beer.
Because all of them have a little bit of alcohol in, but then that's
Right.
also true of slightly old orange juice. So are you going to get pulled over for that?
I mean, it definitely in America. It's like anything open beer in the cars, like instant badness, right? But if it's
Instant badness,
alcohol-free,
I think that's the literal rule that they'll bring out in their notebook. Yeah, you've committed literal badness there.
But alcohol-free beer, Johnny, if it's in a 330ml can and it's alcohol-free, is it illegal? Because it's I don't know. Anyway,
there could be a video in you and me driving with like a Lucky
God.
Saint. Just
God.
Other low alcohol beers are available. That's just
and then we just sort of like cruise past police officers and just sort of like
drive
with it
past
out the
police
window.
stations.
We could cheers them out of the window.
We could.
Go, hello officers, cheers. Hope you're having a lovely Friday. We could do a Friday 5pm while cruising. No, I don't want to. I don't drink and drive, even if it's not alcohol-based beer. It's just a bad idea, surely. But maybe,
it's literal badness. We've established that.
It's literal badness. Yeah. I'm. I wish I was involved. Do I wish I was involved? I kind of wish I was involved in this week's video because you had a couple of beers there which I've never tried, and one in particular which turned out to be an absolute blinder. Which I've always thought had a great brand behind it. So it's
I mean, let's be careful with the phrase "absolute blinder." I mean, it was a good lager. You know, it wasn't half as well. I mean, in terms of my scores, it was very close to being as good as Pilsner Urquell, but it wasn't. That's a flaw in my rating system and in my impartiality. But it was a decent beer in a nice can, and the fact that it came top in a blind taste test would make that slightly more objective. I was excited to try Banquet and High Life. High Life was a complete disappointment.
Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, I always thought Miller High Life was cool as well. But
Bradley, bear with me. I'm just going to have to turn off the cooler because it's just kicked in.
Becoming a classic moment in Friday 5pm now. It's the cooler. What's the thing that people do when they have a chat around the cooler in an office?
Water cooler chat.
Water cooler moment.
Like,
a water
did you see X
cooler
Factor?
moment. Yeah. This is the literal water cooler moment in the podcast.
I'm really enjoying that now. At the end of every podcast, usually at about 6 p.m. on a Friday, I always get a couple of tweets. I've even had emails, a couple of DMs on Instagram going, "Turn on the cooler," and sometimes it's genuinely reminded me to turn on the cooler. So, it's funny and it's also practical. So thank you, everybody that does it.
Is there a way, if the Grainfather, can we automate that to turn itself back on? I mean, it is one tiny flaw, I think, in the Grainfather design. I mean, really, nobody else probably has this issue because nobody else is constantly recording podcasts and videos right next to their glycol chiller. Yeah. It's not a very sensible setup. So, yeah, I say it's a flaw in Grainfather's design. I'd say it's more a flaw in the Brudio design than it is in the Grainfather. If we were to plug it into a smart plug, that wouldn't help either, right? Because then it's still on, but you're just physically switching an off button on. Yeah, I don't. Have you seen? Think there's a way we could automate this. There is. There's this little thing, right? Which I think it's called a woodpecker. I've seen it. I don't know if it's on Kickstarter yet, but it's basically. I thought you mean the thing that's in The Simpsons, where it keeps pressing Y during the nuclear breakdown. It looks like that. So it's a tiny little button that is literally like a little woodpecker. So like the Homer thing, but it's automated and you can connect it to smart things and all these clever techie bits of software. And it is literally like a finger press, and you can get a sticky pad and stick it onto any button that you want, and then it's wirelessly controlled from wherever you are in the world. We could set up an automation that allows, we should get a webcam that is the Brudio check sort of spring watch that watches you in your native environment, like you're a small vole or something underground. And anyone only Patreon members can watch it. And then also it gives them the power to actuate the woodpecker to turn back on the cooler. What do you reckon? Easy. I don't really know why we need a video. Just because it's invasive and it's fun. Right. And it's it makes you sort of wildlife, People can genuinely just watch. Do you remember back in the day when webcams were quite new and people would just put them in amazing sort of locations, and there was a website at one point, it almost like chat roulette type thing, but less penises, and you could click on it and it would take you to a different webcam around the world in somewhere scenic or somewhere very different. So it might be downtown LA, or you might be somewhere in the mountains in the Dolomites or something, and it would just have almost like a still life vista. No people, just scenery and stuff. We just do that with you, mate, in the garden, in the Brudio. What do you reckon? No. We'll catch your illegal sort of Walter White making sort of moonshine out of hours, Bradley, or something. You've rumbled me. Yeah. I mean, I'm not making moonshine, but I do have an 8.5% double IPA currently chilling away. I'm going to be packaging it today. So it's not moonshine, but it's strong. It'll put hairs on your chest. Can we do a series regardless of gender? Homebrewing called Breaking Brad, which is really really difficult homebrews, and we have to wear let you loose in the Brudio. Yeah. Trying to brew difficult beer. Yeah, Breaking Brad. There you go. It's a good name, but I don't want to do it. It sounds too hard. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, homebrewing is stressful at the best of times. Yes, it is. It's a very stressful hobby. I was talking about this with my wife actually. So she loves sewing. Yeah. And I say she loves sewing. When she sews, she's mostly swearing at the sewing machine, and when I homebrew, I'm mostly swearing at the Grainfather. And then we both finish our hobbies and go I don't really enjoy my hobby. It's it infuriates me. That's not good. I think we're both in it for the results. So not for the journey. Would you say there's any point in time when you're brewing that you feel zen or relaxed? Well, I mean, I'll tell you what. Or in the zone, because it's like video games and stuff where you just you could while away hours. Do you ever feel because I know when I'm homebrewing with you, I'm always on edge because I'm like, oh my god, this could go wrong at any point, and there always seems to be all these moments of jeopardy and points where it's teetering on the edge. Yeah, I mean, I think so. The two beers that I've got in tank right now, the brew process was pretty zen because there were styles I'd done before. They weren't particularly challenging recipes. I had to get a pretty high gravity for the double New England, but after the pastry stout,
debacle, I A, know how to do it much more reliably, and B, I'm sort of ready for the challenges. So they were pretty zen. I think I've mischaracterized my homebrew experience. When I'm filming for the Craft Beer channel, we're always doing something wild, and that is incredibly stressful, especially when you're also filming it. But these two beers, which I brewed on my own, they were easy styles. The actual sort of filming of it wasn't that intensive because a lot of the story is sort of around it. It was very zen. It was very easy. It was very nice. And, I had a couple of beers and I did some emails and listened to music, and it was good. It was what I'd imagine everybody else experiences when they homebrew, but I just have to keep up in those goddamn stakes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when you throw in trying to film everything and, or like get the right shots and get close-ups and blah, 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 like all this stuff, throwing that into the mix of homebrewing on top of the homebrewing stress, that is a recipe for a breaking Brad. But do you think that Zen home brewing potentially is like quite automated? So you're at the point where you're using one of those. What's the thing I've got in my garage which we haven't cracked out yet? I'm gonna maybe
the mini brew.
Yeah, but it's something like that just automates everything for you. Is that more?
But I mean, even that, when we made that video where we tested it out for the first time, that was still a little bit stressful. I guess maybe, because we were learning how to use it, maybe once you've got the knack of it, it is pretty automated. And the Grainfather, to be fair, is very automated as well.
It is.
I think homebrewing is quite a zen activity. There's actually lots of breaks, I think that's what people are surprised about when they do their first brew. It's like you mash in and then you wait an hour. You raise it to the boil and then you wait an hour. You started transferring, you wait half an hour. It is sort of hurry up and wait homebrew. The 100%. Mash can get pretty frenetic, but otherwise it is a pretty zen hobby to have, particularly when you're at the sort of the level that we're at.
And all of those breaks, Johnny, give you a perfect opportunity to consume fridge beers. So maybe not beers that you'd want, one-off beers that are going to blow your head off. Fridge beers. Would you say that any of the beers from this week's video were fridge beer worthy?
Okay, that's a link.
If you
I
could
enjoyed that one. Yeah, well, so, I mean, if you look at the results, the spreadsheet from that, there were a couple of beers that scored pretty well. I mean, as we've already referenced, Coors Banquet is a decent beer.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by not how good, I was surprised by how pure in its intention Coors Light was. It was, compared to all of the other light beers, incredibly clean. So
Coors is just kind of killing it in that market.
I've gained some respect for Coors, and I've lost some respect for Bud. I never even had an opinion on Busch, but now I know that beer sucks.
From whence I'm sat, Johnny, I'm looking at a Coors neon sign that I bought at a boot sale as a teenager that's in my front room. Bright blue. It's not switched on right now, but it's in my front room. So
teenage you had taste, apparently.
Yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, I mean, I love like Breweriana and all this sort of stuff. So I've also got a giant like 1960s enamel Estella sign in my kitchen from France. That's all in French and stuff. Which I really hope that craft breweries. One little concern I have is the craft breweries in 50, 60 years' time. Not all of the designs will still be remembered and loved, and even without the context, sort of enjoyed. I think a lot of the designs in craft beer have been a little bit short term. It is. I think it is quite slightly short termist or a bit too abstract. A lot of them that are so cool that are like. The brand is like an anti-brand, and they just splash like beautiful artwork or like kind of guest artists and almost sort of like textural tapestries, but the actual sort of branding itself isn't iconic, and there isn't like a sort of masthead that you can kind of look at and go, "Oh, that's that brand." Yeah. I guess the only ones that might do things like that in X amount of years are people like Camden, which have kept it quite sort of branded and iconic in the typographic sort of setting and stuff. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's an interesting thought to think who's going to be the celebrated brands in 50 years rather than the celebrated breweries. Yeah. Anyway, back to the video. So if you haven't seen it yet this week's video was me tasting 12 American macro lagers from around the US, plus a Birra Moretti that was snuck in as a stooge to check my biases, and that helped us calibrate the score because I dropped it 5 points from the previous tasting, so I was feeling pretty mean when I filmed it. And yeah, blown away by how good Coors Banquet was, how good Coors Light was, and how absolutely terrible Busch Light was. Michelob Ultra, which I absolutely spanked in the scores. I feel a little bit bad about that because, like Coors, in its intention, it nailed it. It tasted of absolutely nothing. And even, I was slightly annoyed, the colour of it, it's hard to express on camera how pale and insipid that beer looked. But it did, do exactly what it said on the tin. But hopefully you enjoyed that video. I thought it was great fun. We're hoping it will be a little viral success like the other ones have been. It's not looking that way at the moment, so I don't understand the YouTube algorithm still, but if I did, we'd make more money than we did. But we had some wonderful comments coming in. Part of the joy of these videos is the extra audience that we bring in. Which seems to be split pretty much 50-50 between the people that say, I wouldn't touch that beer with a barge pole, and the other half going, you're a goddamn snob, stop being so elitist and hipster and other such phrases. I just want to thank JS4 Directions, who's come back with The Bold Snob Returns. Love these tastings. He says we should do one on Canadian lagers, so maybe JS4 Directions can sort us out with those Canadian beers. And again, thank you very much to the two legends that sorted us out with these ones. Did you have any favourite comments lying around, Bradley?
I had a comment. Well, actually, I was going to ask you about. There was green apple going on in a few of those beers, which you said you thought was intentional. I thought that was quite interesting. So to sort of make them taste fresh, they maybe put they maybe purposefully infect it or whatever to get that kind of profile. I think it's.
I doubt that they sort of purposefully add acetaldehyde. I think it's probably it's certainly a byproduct of fermentation. It's one that isn't cleared up because they don't actually lager these beers. Although somebody in the comments said one of these is lagered. I don't know which one it would be, but. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it might be a bit like diacetyl and Pilsner Urquell. It's it's been there historically, and they've kept it because it's part of the profile, and because without any hops, without that lager kind of crispness that you get with a really mature, well lagered beer, maybe the acetaldehyde does kind of add a freshness to it. But equally, we have to remember that I'm drinking tiny samples of these beers with a highly... Not to blow my own trumpet, but a highly attuned palate because I'm looking deep for these things.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not there in the quantities that a drinker would really perceive, but it might sort of help it along. So yeah, I think if they didn't want that acetaldehyde, because it definitely was there, they have the ability to get rid of it, and they don't. So it's either there on purpose or it's tolerated.
Yeah. And another thing I was thinking about was have these all got rice in them? Are they all rice beers?
Most of them were corn. Maize.
Right, so it's like that high fructose corn syrup sort of shizzle that we don't really have a lot of.
Depends on the brewery. Some of them, I think it's Coors, say they never use high fructose corn syrup.
Right. Okay.
The rest of them are using, corn syrup, maize extracts, or actual maize in the boil, whatever it is they decide to use and is part of their process. But that would explain why in this tasting and in the first macro tasting, I was picking up corn and people were like, "Oh, that's DMS," and no, it's literally corn.
It's the corn. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so they're kind of beer, Johnny, but not as we know it, sort of stuff. It's kind of really almost sort of kind of messed about with in quite a big way.
Yeah, there was a line which I think I ended up cutting in the edit, in which I said, people talk about pastry beer and say, "Is this really beer?" But you could say the same for these macro light lagers. You know, does this bear any resemblance? It doesn't really bear any resemblance even to sort of Pilsner Urquell, let alone any of the more historical styles that sort of we had in Britain and Germany and Czech Republic and even America hundreds of years ago. They are wildly different. So yeah, are they really beers? I don't know. They're certainly not really lagers. But that said, I mean, we had some comments. I think you picked out a couple, Brad, about how some beers shouldn't have been in there because they were a different style. So they weren't macro light lagers; they were sort of Vienna inspired, which was Yingling and Sam Adams.
Yeah, exactly. We had from Bim Scutney. Part of his comment was, "I think Sam Adams is completely different beer than the rest of them. Probably shouldn't have been included." So is he saying that it's a Vienna? Because like you just said, that there were two Vienna styles in there, but it wasn't a style thing for you, was it? It was macro lagers from the US. It wasn't like what particular style of lager they were.
Yeah, I mean, I specifically didn't put light lager tasting. It wasn't style. It was what are the big regional or macro beers drunk in different parts of the States, and obviously we didn't get anywhere near all of them, but we got lots of the more famous ones, the more available ones. Our contact whose rattle was in the New England area, so there's a bias towards that part of the US. But yeah, it wasn't about the style, it was about who are the big players in America.
Yeah,
and Sam Adams Boston Lager is absolutely huge, and Yingling, although it's only in 3 or 4 states, I think it is a giant brewery for that. It's, well over 1 million barrels. He might have been alluding to the fact that those two fit the definition of craft, but they would probably not fit our definitions of craft from that video that we put together, and I wouldn't regard them as craft, even though Sam Adams was a pretty good beer. The Yingling was a bit disappointing. It was much thinner than I remember it being in Pennsylvania when we were out there filming. But yeah, I wouldn't regard them as craft, and I would therefore regard them as macro. Certainly the volumes that they're producing would imply macro, but I think also to some extent the flavours and the intention and the approach would too.
I haven't drunk PBR in a long time, but I used to. That would be, obviously that's like a dive bar beer classic. Incredible branding, PBR. It's one of my favourite brands. And they do quite a lot of interesting stuff. I followed their Instagram a couple of years ago, and they have like an art of PBR thing where people turn cans into sculptures and all sorts of crazy shizzle. But it's a hipster beer. I can remember I used to work for Vice magazine sometimes, sort of freelance, and go to all the sort of Vice parties, and they'd have PBR at Vice parties before they started their own beer thing, which is pretty rubbish. Have you ever had their own beer? I can't even remember.
No, but it's just a macro beer just made by AB InBev, right?
Yeah,
just a white labelled thing. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I've sort of remember it. I kind of remember it in terms of like it was almost like a gig style beer that like when you go to a gig and they've only got Carling or they've only got Red Stripe or whatever. It was in that kind of league of stuff that wasn't amazing, but when it's ice cold, it's like, oh, okay, it's free and it's ice cold, so I'm going to drink it, and it's got an awesome label on it. So
yeah, and I mean it was an all right beer. It tried to be a lager. It had malt depth and it had some bitterness. It had structure to it, unlike a lot of the light beers. So I was quite impressed by it. I've never been impressed by it before, which makes me think that perhaps the American brewed version is quite a different prospect to what's sort of contract brewed over here, but I don't know that for sure. That might be a little experiment I'll get to do one day when I can put them next to each other, because in theory these big companies would do blind taste tests to make sure that all their beer tastes within the same parameters all around the world, but I don't know how possible that is and how regular those tests are done.
I'm saddened that the Miller High Life, the champagne of beers, wasn't very good, because
the Lambrina beer, it was very average. It was not a lot better than any of the others, whereas Coors really, like, that aroma really stuck out, and I'd love to know the recipe for it to see where that aroma is coming from, whether it's a specific yeast or a specific hop. But it was a different league to the other light.
The question is, Johnny, when are we going to brew a clone of Coors Banquet?
When I get the recipe, I'm going to start doing some googling after this and see what if the recipe for Banquet is out there and what makes it so much more sort of aromatic and flavour forward than the other beers that I tasted. While we're on the topic of blind taste tests, this week I was judging the World Beer Awards, which was a lot of fun. I was at the Hilton in Kensington High Street.
Nice.
No expense spared, and tasted. I didn't actually get any lager categories, which is a shame because the World Beer Awards it has an amazing range of categories, and there was a table that got to do box, doppelbox, hella box, doing all the box, and I was on a table. I got pastry stouts, which was interesting.
Jeez.
They called them flavoured stouts, so some of them were sort of okay. I had two from China that were oak aged and sour, so oak aged sour stouts. I can't say anything more than that. I can't say what I thought of them because it was a blind taste test and it was secret. But yeah, like really interesting variety of flavoured stouts. And I did a golden ales section. I did an American pale ale section. I did an experimental section. Like so many different styles to taste in one day, and the palate really took a pounding. But it's a lot of fun to taste blind because you really do learn a lot about your palate, a lot about beer, and all of it in an objective surrounding. So I know we sort of do these videos because they're very popular, but also I learn huge amounts every time I do it. And at the World Beer Awards, I was also sat next to somebody who runs a company that teaches people about off flavors. So I was learning an absolute ton from everything she was saying. So that was properly awesome.
Wow. That sounds great. I hope they fed you well. What did you eat?
They fed us very well, surprisingly good. I didn't know whether... I don't think I've stayed in a Hilton for years, but the food was good. I had a veggie lasagna with roasted rosemary potatoes, a delicious salad and broccoli. It was...
Hang on. You had a lasagna with potatoes. They double carbed you?
Yeah, they double carbed me, mate. They must have known I was coming.
Did they bring table rolls as well? Did they triple carb you?
I could have had a table roll, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to stick to 2 carbs.
2 carbs. You were consuming vast amounts of, well, maybe not vast amounts, but amounts of like pastry stouts and shizzle. You're going to get maybe a little bit tipsy. Double carbing is interesting. That's very tactical. That's a tactical
I tell you that I was judging the World Beer Awards, and you're like, yeah, but what's the carb situation?
Yeah. Well, they've been sensible there, haven't they, Johnny? You've got to give them props for that. They're not serving diplomats lasagna and potatoes. Come on, mate. That's tactical. They double carbed you up, buddy. They don't want any they don't want anyone swinging from those Hilton chandeliers. None of that.
I mean, have you been to a Hilton recently? It's basically a slightly fancier Premier Inn.
That's what I mean. In my head, I was thinking, I'm pretty sure they're not that very good. But I wanted to be very optimistic about it, but I'm pretty sure they're a bit whack.
Yeah, there were no chandeliers, I can assure you.
Yeah.
But I was well looked after. I drank, it was about 45 beers I tasted throughout the day over 6 hours. So The double carb was appreciated, even though it was very small sips. And they provided muffins halfway through, just as the pastry stouts came out. So I was eating muffins and drinking pastry stout, which is just a Sunday for me.
At the same
double
time
pastry.
as double carbing. Wow.
Oh yeah. And then having to have a cracker
decadence.
to cleanse my palate.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was quite the day. Anyway, we are running rapidly out of time, and we've got a question that I want to answer because they've been waiting on it for a little while. So we're gonna take this question. It's a great little question from Mark Bailey. So I'll leave it to him.
Hey, Brad and Johnny, love the channel, love Friday 5 p.m., and I love the curious stares I get when wearing your merchandise. My question revolves around how we experience beer. Now, it's no secret that the setting in which a beer is consumed can dictate our lasting opinion of the beer itself. For example, if you were to drink a world-class beer in a room full of rowdy, misogynistic lads, it wouldn't be as enjoyable as, say, a mediocre beer drank in a laid-back setting with good friends and good conversation. And related to that is the nostalgia factor. Sometimes we put some not-so-great beers on a pedestal because we drank them way back when in the good old days. But if we were to drink them now with more developed palates, we would probably slap our younger selves. So my question is, what are your nostalgia beers? The beers that, looking back and being honest with your inner beer conscience, are not so great, but still have the innocent hubris of your prepubescent beer palate. Love and beer.
So thank you for that lovely question, and indeed for the wonderful colour that you added. That was well put. Bradley, do you have a beer that at the time you loved and now is a little bit of a secret shame?
Well, still, like, today I'm not wearing it, but one of my favourite T-shirts and my favourite beer experiences, and used to be one of my favourite beers, was Lagunitas IPA. It's Lagunitas IPA, Johnny. It's obviously a shadow of its former self now. They've reformulated it like they have with bloody Dr. Pepper and such. This wasn't for sort of sugar reasons with Lagunitas. This was for corporate whatever reasons. I don't know.
It was ABV. It was ABV. In Europe, they couldn't
ABV.
sell it at 6 point.
Yeah.
Was it 6.2? So they dropped it
Yeah,
down to
weird,
5.5.
isn't it? It's like, Lagunitas was really struggling to sell their IPA before the big boys got involved. So they thought they had to make it lower. I mean, like, why would you do that? It's totally crazy. Totally
Well, because
crazy.
the English market want it in pints. And at 6.2, it was too expensive and too strong for the British market. So they went, well, we'll drop the ABV because people don't really know what Lagunitas IPA is yet in Europe. And that didn't seem to work for them because I guess they kind of ruined the beer. But also, I mean, I can't remember the last time I had Lagunitas, like the full strength one. It's been a long time. But by the end of our love of Lagunitas, like after the sale to Heineken, I was already starting to go, I'm not really enjoying this beer because increasingly as hop saturation increased and juiciness increased, or even just, really dialed in pine and citrus aromas got better, it started to feel quite old school in a way that maybe like Pliny and Bell's Two Hearted and these other great beers haven't sort of aged. They've managed to stay modern classics. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale as well, whereas Lagunitas felt dated in about 2016 or 17, the last time I had it.
Man, I wouldn't say I dream about it, but I certainly reminisce about that West Coast road trip and visiting their private sort of back bar where they had the giant what was those tables called? Where the stupid whatever that game is, I don't know what it is. It's like quoits, but sort of giant wooden board. Do you remember that thing? What are they called?
What are you talking about?
We went behind the brewery in the staff bar bit, which had a great name, but I can't remember. And they had one of those games which you just slide the pucks along.
Oh, you mean shuffleboard?
Shuffleboard, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it was like an awesome little bar, and I just remember it being just.
I think it was the original tap room, wasn't it? And then it became like an
yeah.
event space and staff bar. Yeah,
it's bloody fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and it's a real shame that it went the way it went, I guess.
I remember we had giant flights as well of everything they made.
Yeah, we did like 16 beers, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Good trip.
In retrospect, should have just had a pint of Lagunitas. Right. Yeah. My and this includes you, Brad. So back when we were working for Jamie Oliver and going out for pints, because Jamie stocked this beer in James Italian, we used to drink and love Curious Brew Pale Ale, which is incredibly dated now. I mean, I think it was Cascade. It was very Sierra Nevada-y, but nowhere near as good as Sierra Nevada. But we used to love it. And I remember I sent it to Tasting Niche, who I don't think makes videos anymore, but we did a little beer exchange, and I sent some going, this is a great pale ale. And I remember I think she reviewed it and was like, it's not a great pale ale.
Oh, damn.
But I think by the time that video actually went live, I was also starting to think, actually, yeah, it's not great.
Yeah,
but that would have been 2013, 14.
Was that a case of we used to drink it in 15 and we had a staff discount, so it was like real cheap to drink it?
Yeah,
I think that was
very much so.
maybe
yeah.
why. But they all didn't they have Camden on in there as well? Am I remembering correctly?
Of other beers?
I thought they had Camden in the.
Oh
in
yeah. I think they
well.
did as well. Yeah. And they started getting in Beavertown as well for a bit because the bar guy was into his beer. But yeah, rest in peace. 15. The other beer I wanted to talk about as well is because it's salient to next week's video, which is our next homebrew adventure, which we've brewed a double New England IPA with the one and only Cloudwater. And so a couple of months ago now, we went up to Cloudwater to film with Paul and Caitlin, who you might remember from our hop rubbing episode last year, to talk about the recipe and put it all together. And as always happens when you talk to Paul Jones of Cloudwater, it's very hard to stay on topic with him. So what was supposed to be like a 5-minute conversation about New England double IPA recipes turned into a 45-minute discussion about the cultural impact of the V series and of double IPAs in general, and indeed Hopfenweissens at one point. And we started talking about Dipper V3, which, if you weren't into craft beer at the time, or if you're not from the UK, was the kind of the beer that broke New England in the UK. So it made everybody suddenly aware of these new yeasts that were helping to produce very hazy beer that was very stone fruit led, and that stone fruit was coming from the yeast. And we were talking about that, and we said, maybe we could base this recipe on Dipper V3, and he was like, I wouldn't do that. And he showed us the recipe, and I was like, yeah, we're not going to do that, because it is so old school. I think it was 100% barley malt, so no oats, no wheat. It had crystal in it. Crystal, maybe Amarillo, something else a bit unusual, and it was just not at all what we'd associate with a New England beer. But at the time, it blew everybody's mind. We'd never had a beer like this, unless you'd been lucky enough to go to Treehouse, which I actually had by that point. But I was just blown away by how good this was, and it was being made in the UK. But nowadays, he said that they get emails every month going, when are you going to rebrew Dipper V3? And they reply, we're not, because if we did, nobody would like it. They'd be like, oh, you've messed it up. It's not the beer it used to be. It's like, no, it is, but it's not the beer that you remember now that we've had it so much better for so many years.
It was so good, Johnny, that I kept a bottle of it in my fridge door, and I couldn't bear to open it. And then it obviously, you have to drink that shit fresh, so it ruined.
You kept it for an occasion, and then it died on you. Hey,
yeah. But I've
got a garage full of those beers.
Oh yeah. It was in there for a long time, far too long. Couldn't bear to throw it away. But yeah. I think that trip to Lagunitas in the West Coast was the first time I met Paul, when we went to Rate Beer.
Oh yeah, because he was over for
Best Festival. And he was doing a collab with those guys in. Is it Magnolia? No, I can't remember.
Magnolia, yeah.
Yeah, it was Magnolia, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
In
who I think they went under and got bought by somebody else. I'm not really sure what happened to them. But yeah, we had some tasty beer there. And yeah, went on a pub crawl with Paul Jones. And I think he sneaks into the video occasionally when we did the Where to Drink in San Francisco. Yeah. Right. Anyway, that's a 35-minute podcast. It's wonderful to have you back, Bradley.
Thanks,
I'm glad to see that your presence has teased out an extra 10 minutes. It's reassuring that it's not me that waffles.
Yes.
So yeah, next week we're on the road, aren't we, Bradley?
Oh, mate, we haven't even got a chance to tell anyone about our road trip adventure. But we're on the road. We're on the road, Johnny. We're going. Can we tell people whereabouts on the road we're going? Maybe just drop a few hints, but
we can drop some hints. I don't think we can say what the project is yet, but we can say where we're going.
So we're going to Norfolk, aren't we? At some point,
yep.
Home of Alan Partridge. We're going up to Burton on Trent at some point, and then I don't know where else we're going, Johnny. Where else are we going?
I was wondering if
we're talking about Birmingham, right? We're going to stop over in Birmingham potentially.
We're going to stop over in Birmingham as we visit Herefordshire.
Yeah, home of the SAS.
Sure, yes. Also home of hops.
Watch out for men
in the
with
UK,
moustaches.
Kent and Hereford.
Ripped dudes with moustaches. Yeah,
I'll let you watch out for that, and I'll focus on filming. So yeah, we're working on a big project next week. We've even got a cameraman who's going to be behind the camera, so that you'll have both me and Brad on screen occasionally out and about, which never really happens.
Are we going to coordinate our outfits, Johnny? Are we wearing the same? Are we wearing the same outfit every day for continuity? Or are you wearing various different outfits?
Great question. Maybe I'll address that off air because I'm not quite sure. We'll have to have a little think about that. I need to plan some more. I need to book us some hotels as well, Bradley. So I've got a busy afternoon finding out the Coors Banquet recipe and booking us some hotels. So yeah, I'm going to get on with that. But we'll be on the road. Hopefully there will still be a Friday 5 p.m. Maybe we'll record it on the road. And yeah, next Wednesday is homebrewing a double New England IPA, which I know a lot of you have been waiting for, and hopefully it's going to be worth it. The beer is smelling utterly unreal, so I'm excited about what's gonna come our way. So yeah, until next week, until next Wednesday and Friday, have a wonderful weekend. Drink some delicious beer, and if you know the recipe to Banquet, drop us an email. The Bubble and Friday 5pm podcasts are brought to you by the nerds behind YouTube's craft beer channel. You can watch over 400 mini documentaries at youtube.com/the craft beer channel, and if you love what we do, support us via Patreon and get access to merchandise and our amazing Discord forum, a positive and welcoming space for everyone who loves beer, food and homebrewing. Love and beer.